Members, good afternoon. We have apologies from Danny Kennedy and William Irwin. I believe Pam Cameron is intending to be here but maybe slightly late. Any other apologies? No. Okay. Members, a list of our current invitations is at page 5 of your meeting packs. In the absence of comment, we'll move on to the draft minutes of the meeting of the 15th of June. Those draft minutes begin at page 7 of your main meeting pack, and the question is, are members content to agree the draft minutes of the meeting of the 15th of June?
Yep, agreed.
Thank you. Matters arising. I've been advised that Cathal Boylan attended an informal meeting with the Dutch ambassador on Thursday. Steve Aiken, Deputy Chair of Economy, and David Ford from DERA were also there. Cal, I don't want to bounce this on you, but is there anything you want to update the members on?
I didn't do a report. No, actually, I enjoyed the meeting. It was very good and constructive, productive meeting. I thought I would recommend it in terms of some of the response we got back from the ambassador. So I mean, obviously I went on behalf of the committee, non-prepared. Although I have to say that I would like to put on record to thank Sean McGeehan for giving me a briefing note. Certainly the feedback and all that. But actually, in the time that's in it and what's going on, it wouldn't have been a bad idea for some people to be there to hear some of the responses in relation to from a European perspective. You know, that's.
Was there Ferrero Rocher at the ambassador's reception?
No, not in room 21. not in room 21, but yes. Obviously, I thought it was a good opportunity to meet. And
okay. Well, thank you for attending on behalf of the committee. So we go on to programme for government scrutiny, members. On the 1st of June, you might remember we agreed we'd coordinate statutory committee responses to the second consultation on the programme for government, which is scheduled for the autumn, alongside consultation on the budget. Now that's what we normally do, coordinate. A draft timetable for the PFG process is not yet available, but based on information that the clerk has been able to glean, she's prepared an outline timetable which you'll find in your tabled pack at page 3. So I'll give you a moment just to switch packs to tabled, please. If you have that on your... What I'm going to suggest is I think there's maybe 3 areas that we should be considering. The first, consultation on the draft Programme for Government Framework, which is the one that's underway at the moment. That's concluding on the 22nd of July. I would suggest it would be useful to get a briefing from the Executive Office in early September to get their analysis of responses to this first consultation. Secondly, as well as our coordinating role, we have a responsibility to consider the Executive Office and their responsibilities in respect to Programme for Government delivery, including their own departmental action plan. So we might wish to request a copy of the departmental action plan early in September after it's been developed, but before it's been agreed by the Executive. And this would enable us to consider the plan and, if necessary, raise any high-level issues that we may have at an early stage and before the draft programme and action plans are put out for the second round of public consultation. And the third issue is we might wish to share this draft timetable with the other statutory committees and recommend they also request sight of an action plan at the earliest opportunity from their respective departments. That will assist with their later scrutiny of the draft programme for government and help inform their input into this committee's coordinated report. And just as a broader point, members, as it is the intention of this executive to be cross-cutting and to have government departments working together, in a joined-up sense, and that role falls largely to the Executive Office. I think we have to give more consideration to whether we equally have a coordinating role in terms of joined-up scrutiny, which would need to be on a cross-statutory committee basis if the government is working on a cross-departmental basis. So I'll leave it there and ask for comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of, if I could just go back to the sort of the opening line, or the opening sort of comments, what is it that you're suggesting that we should look at before it's agreed by the Executive Committee?
Their action plan, the departmental action plan, because the programme for government will have, the Executive Office is not just a coordinating office, it is a delivery department. So they will need to have commitments within the PFG and an action plan for delivering on those commitments.
Yes.
So I'm suggesting it would be useful if we had sight of that action plan early enough to be able to express any concerns we may have.
Right. And would it normally have been the case, I'm obviously just a new member, would it normally have been the case that the Executive Office would have shared their, or OFM, DFM as was, would have shared their action plan with the committee before it was agreed?
Well, that would be in principle, they should be consulting with us, because it is our role to advise.
Yes. But I would have thought that the balance then would have been that we advise once they publish the action plan and point out where things should be changed if we think they should. But the actual process of drafting an action plan is surely the business of the Executive Office.
Yes, and what I'm suggesting is once it's drafted, but before it's published, that we have sight of it. Which means if we have ideas that they like, they have ownership of them. We're working collaboratively, and it's not a question of once it's published we're coming back and saying, well, actually we don't like that, which some will interpret as criticism. So what I'm posing is what I believe a collaborative form of working with them, rather than what could be perceived to be more confrontational.
Right. So it wouldn't just trying to understand, so it wouldn't normally have been the case that we would have had input in this way into the formation of their action plan, but we're suggesting that we would like to have input. Is that?
I'm not sure whether this is the way it was done in the past before or not, but in the words of the First Minister, we're going to do things differently.
Yes, absolutely, and I accept that, but what I'm saying is if the pulling together of a departmental action plan is the responsibility of the department, and the responsibility of the committee is to scrutinise the work of the department.
Yep.
Is it not for the department to pull the action plan together and for us to then comment on it? If there are ideas that we would like to see included in the departmental action plan and things that we want to see there, then I don't think there's any harm in us feeding into their process of pulling an action plan together by producing, the sort of areas that we would like to see some work concentrated on. I'm just mindful of the fact that, as you say, we are in a new dispensation, as it were, in terms of how the government functions. I would just be keen that we should sort of conform to the new realities, as it were.
I think just to be clear, I talk about a scrutiny role, but actually the statutory duty is to advise and assist.
Right.
And in that spirit, we should be assisting in the drawing up of the action plan, I believe.
Has the committee assisted the department in the drawing up of the action plan before?
I don't know the answer to that, but my response would be, if not, it should have. Well, are you making a firm proposal that we do not?
No, I'm just keen to understand the logic, and I think if we have issues, if there are particular areas at work or concern that we would like to see reflected in the action plan, then we should perhaps set some time aside as a committee to have discussions around that and maybe draft something that we would like to submit as part of their process of drawing the action plan together. Ultimately, I mean, the drawing together of the government's action plan is the responsibility of the government, I would have thought. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, as I say, I'm a new member and I'm open to guidance from other members on the issue, although I think there's plenty of us around this table are new members.
Exactly.
But I'm open to guidance from others.
Okay, but I'll open it now, but what I'm saying is it is the responsibility of the department to draw up an action plan.
Yeah.
It will be our responsibility to look at it.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting we look at it at the earliest possible moment so that we can help shape it as per our statutory duty to advise and assist.
Could,
Yeah. Well,
can I say that I think there's no harm in asking, you know, whether they say, yeah, that's fair, you can see it or you can't. No, I would ask the question and then after that let them decide whether we're going to get sight of it or not.
I mean, to draw an analogy, when
No, I'm not disagreeing.
when the department is putting something out to consultation, such as a draft strategy, they are supposed to come to us and consult on the consultation before they consult. And on occasions, we are able to say, actually, here is an area where we think you've missed out, or here is an area where we think you should sharpen it up, or whatever.
Yes, and I don't want to seem awkward, but yes, I agree with that in the sense that they draw up something and then bring it to us. In the process, if maybe I'm wrong, in terms of the process that you've described, the department draws up something, then brings it to us for our views, then can amend according to our views. Where I think there's a departure in terms of the idea that's been suggested, where I think there's a departure is the department draws the thing up, then brings it to us. What appears to be, and I'm open to correction, and I'm open to instruction as to whether or not this has been the case up to this point. What appears to be being suggested is that the point where the department draws the thing up is where we are involving ourselves. Is that the suggestion? That we involve ourselves in the drawing together of the action plan?
No. I'm saying when they're drawing up an action plan,
Yeah.
they consult us.
Yes.
We may say it's fine, we may say here are some ideas, they would take those ideas away, they may say bin them, or they may say incorporate them,
Okay.
and then they publish their action plan and sign it off, have it signed off by the executive.
I see.
And if it's signed off with the endorsement of the committee, it is a stronger.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. So, Mr. Milne's suggestion is that we should write to them and ask to see the action.
Yeah, yeah, because they'll decide ultimately whether we say it or not, isn't that right? So, you know, ask and satisfy everyone here.
It's fine.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite see that there is a point of difference.
no, I don't see, honestly, I don't see it myself, you know, but I'm just saying there, you know, that's ask and then others
You shall
decide.
receive.
Ask and others.
Yes, the department can, of course, say thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah,
We're drawing it up.
absolutely.
Okay.
But you heard the First Minister and Deputy First Minister in the evidence session saying, I paraphrase, we want to work with you. So,
Yep. Or-
Sure, just a point, I mean, because we've actually moved into a new system of working compared to any other term. And I know the members new to it, but the way we're going about business now is slightly different. There's a different model there. Whilst it's still a scrutiny role committee, it's also a working partnership, and it's like you alluded to what you said on the day that the OFM, DFM, or the executive office now as it is, appeared before us. I don't see an issue in terms of asking. Should be working in partnership more as opposed to the old system, slightly different, you know.
and to emphasise, the role of the statutory committees has not changed.
Yeah, no,
But I am raising the question, do we need to look at it, given the focus that is going to come on joined-up government and a number of departments working on a common goal? Do we need as statutory committees to be working together in common pursuit in terms of our advice, our assistance and our scrutiny of government policies? Broader issue, I'm not saying we have to answer it today, but I do think to be consistent we have to think of a way that we do it, which may mean joint committee meetings to look at certain policies and strategies. So on this specific, members, just to be clear, are you content, first of all, I was suggesting we request a briefing on the analysis of the responses to the first consultation, which is on the draft programme for government framework, which we should be able to get a briefing, if they're willing to give it, around early September. Are we content to request the committee is provided with the Executive Office Action Plan before it is agreed by the Executive? That we request it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fast.
And are we content to write to all the other statutory committees, giving the anticipated process and timetable that the clerks put in the table papers, and the stages at which committees may wish to engage with their respective departments? So basically we are offering a draft template to the other statutory committees.
Fine.
Okay. You're happy?
Thanks.
Any thoughts, members, on how we might take forward our thoughts on joined up scrutiny and advice and assistance?
I think, Chair, was there a previous suggestion that, given that our sort of new approach is modelled very much on examples in Scotland, I think was cited as one example, it might be worth seeking evidence from someone that's got experience in that.
We have asked Rays to look at this, so we can wait for that. The other thing I would suggest to you, if you're content, is that I raise it at the chairperson's liaison group, which would seem to be a fitting forum. Okay, members, thank you very much.
Just on that point, I mean, I was saying, obviously, because of the Executive Committee in office, I was saying we're in working partnership with certain issues that we'll have with certain committees, or you're talking about all committees, if you're talking about, say, a joint committee venture and looking at certain policy. Is it for us, or are we going to concentrate on the number of themes we have a responsibility in this? Is that, or have you thought about that?
I think that's the sort of thing you've got to tease out, because at a certain point you're basically saying everybody's in the scrum. I'm thinking more...
As far as this committee goes, I mean, each committee will have their own certain fields, but we're going to be linked with committees in certain, maybe, specifics in terms of policy and that, and I mean, working together under the PFG, the new model. All I'm saying is that the way you're planning it, or are you going to leave it to...
Well, I'll give you two examples, Cathal, where I think we need to take a look. Let's say I was talking to someone this morning about a mental health initiative, and basically they were saying it would fall primarily to health and justice. So should the departments be coming together to make that happen? Yes, they should. So should the statutory committees for justice and health be coming together to scrutinise, assist and advise? I think probably yes, rather than have the two working in silos, which is what we're trying to get away from. If you get to a point where it's 4, 5, 6 committees, that becomes a bit more difficult. The other area which we had towards the end of the last mandate was OFM, DFM were bringing forward strategies like delivering social change and together building a united community, where they were the lead and the coordinator of the policy. But say there was one programme within it, which was the Department of Education. So when the officials were here and we said, how's that going? They would say, I can't tell you, it's the Department of Education. So if we're going to do more of that, and I think everybody thinks we should be doing more of that because it is joined up and it's outcome based, we are not able to scrutinise. So do we write to the Committee of Education and say, will you please ask what's going on there? Or is it more coordinated to find a way of working with the Department of Education? And if so, what's the best actual mechanism for doing that?
No, I mean, even like the communities in terms of delivery and the subject you're just after raising there. So it's something, no. I mean, I'm happy enough. We have a number of things in this committee that we could be linking with specific other committees in Scotland. It's just when you mentioned about the executive office overall authority on it. That's not to say we as a committee would have overall, you know, as one of the leading committees, maybe to overlook the others. They have specific roles themselves. But I think working in partnership would be...
I'm not saying we take all this onto ourselves, but I think we may be the committee most likely to be charged with make sure that there is a statutory committee or combination of statutory committees who are assisting, advising and scrutinising, whatever it may be.
Okay.
Members, can I just break? We have people in the public gallery now, just to remind them that we would ask you to put your phones onto airplane mode, and you can connect through Wi-Fi. It's the NIA Open, and I think the instructions are on the seats. And we also want to welcome some students on work placement with Chris Little, and you're very welcome today. Members, then to our first briefing. It's from officials from the Executive Office. We're going to discuss June monitoring, the budget for 16-17, victims and survivors, and the historical institutional abuse inquiry. Your clerk's brief is in the main packet, page 13. The June monitoring statement, page 19. Extract of the budget document for 2016-17, which relates to the Executive Office, begins at page 56. And the Department Overview and Key Issues document begins at page 62. Now, you'll note the clerk's brief at page 13 provides information on the pages of the departmental documents that members may wish to refer to in respect of the topics we're going to discuss today. So, we're joined by Dr. Mark Brown, who I believe is Director of Strategic Policy, Equality and Good Relations.
That's correct, Chair.
And the Accounting Officer. Okay. Stephen Boyd is Head of Finance and Corporate Services Division. Check.
Yeah.
And Ricky Irwin, Head of Equality, Victims and the Human Rights Division.
Correct.
Check. Right. Mark, if you'd like to make some brief opening remarks, and I think it might be easier once you've done that if we address the issues in turn, and we'll take questions on each area as we go from the committee. I'm going to suggest we're going to start with June monitoring, then do the budget, then victims and survivors, and then the HIA.
Do you want me to break my comments up in that? Or do you
No,
want me to
if you comments
the entire
prepared,
comments?
you do your comments,
Okay.
but then I'm suggesting we do
That's fine.
4 sections in the Q&A.
Yep, okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for inviting us here today. This is one of 2 sessions. I think we're going to cover a number of areas next week on programme for government and on Together Building a United Community and delivering social change. I thought it might be helpful in beginning, given that there's a number of new members of the committee, pardon me, to say a little bit about the structure of the TEO budget. Just a few short words. If we examine the department's opening baseline budget, which is 59.1 million, about 46% of this is allocated to the core department and 54% to its arm's length bodies. So it's almost a 50-50 split between the two. TEO has lead responsibility for 2 key executive programmes. The Delivering Social Change programme, which includes a number of programmes co-funded with Atlantic Philanthropies, and Together Building a United Community. So, in respect of those programmes, TEO is responsible for making recommendations to the Executive on the allocations for the central funds for delivering social change, SIF and childcare, which amount to some 22 million resource and 15 million capital, and for the Together Building a United Community funds of some 12 million. These funds are held centrally by the Department of Finance and then allocated directly to departments through the in-year monitoring rounds on the advice of the Executive Office. Some of those initiatives are delivered directly by the Executive Office and therefore the funds come to us. Others are delivered by the departments and therefore the funds go directly to the departments. The consequence of that is that the department is very dependent on the in-year monitoring exercises through which these funds are allocated. It receives the equivalent of just over 1/3 of its opening budget through in-year monitoring. So that's 59.1 million that we start with will increase by 1/3 over the course of the year as a consequence of those extra funds that come in. So monitoring rounds are absolutely vital for the Executive Office to get the resources that we need to deliver key executive programmes and also to make those funds available to other departments to deliver those programmes. Starting with the opening budget position, then, as you're no doubt aware, the 16-17 settlement reflects constrained public expenditure environment within which we all have to operate. Following the executive approval of Budget 16-17 on the 17th of December, the budget settlement for 16-17 provides TEO with a total resource budget of 59.1 million, which is a reduction of 5% on the opening 15-16 baseline. However, within this total, some £400,000 has been allocated to the department to fund the Equality Commission voluntary exit scheme from the Public Sector Transformation Fund, which means that the effective in-year reduction comparing year on year is 5.7%, which is equivalent to about £3.5 million on opening 15-16 baselines. TEO has been allocated some £5 million capital in budget 16-17. As part of the budget restructuring, DFP allocated some 980k of that capital to the Department for Communities for ILEX-related projects. Because of the change in the arrangements around transformation, ILEX is no longer transferring from TEO to DFC. In fact, ILEX has been brought to an end and the functions brought within the department. So the capital that was transferred to DFC will be brought back to TEO in June monitoring, which means we get that extra 980k. That's just a technical adjustment. The department has also been allocated £6 million financial transactions capital. As I mentioned, the budget provides the annual allocation for the DSC initiative of 14 million resource and 15 million capital to support the continued rollout of the Social Investment Fund, the childcare strategy and other DSC projects. And there's a further £8 million of resource funding has been provided to progress those DSC projects, the Delivering Social Change projects, which are co-funded with Atlantic Philanthropy. The budget settlement also provides £12 million resource funding in respect of the Shared Future, the TBUC programme. So in respect of June monitoring, then, through the June monitoring round, the department received drawdowns to its baseline from central funds of some 13.8 million for Delivering Social Change, some 7.4 million for TBUC, and some 6 million for SIF capital grant. In addition, the department declared surrenders to the consolidated fund that's back into the centre of 1.1 million. This was in respect of the sale proceeds that we received for the sale of 2 lots of the Shackleton site in Ballykelly. The department completed the sale of approximately 9 acres of the Shackleton site to Dard for its new headquarters building on the 13th of April for 110k, and subsequently completed the sale of approximately 621 acres of the Shackleton site to the MGM Group for 1 million on the 29th of April 2016. The department is in the process of selling the remaining 86 acres of the Shackleton site to NI Water to develop an integrated constructed wetlands to replace the wastewater treatment works that currently deals with the waste from Ballykelly village. The current LPS valuation for this part of the site is 390k. And it's anticipated that sale will be completed in 2016-17 and actioned in a future monitoring round. So effectively, the total of that for Ballykelly is £1.5 million for the Shackleton site. Finally, there's a further surrender was declared in respect of financial transactions capital. The 6 million that we had received was provided to support the development of Grade A office accommodation on the Ebrington site. But given the likely timescales involved in bringing this project to development, it's unlikely that that allocation will be required in 16-17, and so that's been surrendered in June monitoring for reallocation across the block. I wrote to all departmental budget holders as part of the process, as we always do, requesting that they take action to identify any potential easements that there would be, which could be used to address any emerging needs going forward as part of June monitoring. There were a number of small easements declared by budget holders, and these have been deployed elsewhere in the department. This allowed us to provide an additional allocation of 465,000 for the Victims and Survivors Service to help meet the needs of new victims that are coming forward. Turning then to moving off finance to Victims and Survivors, Equality and HIA, to make a few brief comments on this area. The department sponsors both the Victims and Survivors Service and the Commission for Victims and Survivors. Ministers set the policy, the Commission provides advice to ministers on victims' issues, and the service is the implementing body. So that's the structure. Funding for the sector has been maintained at over £14 million this year, and the VSS has acted quickly to ensure that schemes are operational for victims as early as possible, and funding for groups is made available. I believe the committee heard from the Chair and CEO of the VSS last week, and I understand the Commissioner and Secretary of the Commission are attending the committee next week. We continue to lead on the collaborative design programme in partnership with VSS and the Commission, with input from the sector. And the aim of this programme is to improve outcomes for victims and survivors through the delivery of new and improved services. Significant progress has been made in the last 12 months in terms of increased flexibility and improved monitoring and evaluation. And a number of pilots delivered this year in VSS have provided positive results, and we're now working with the service and the Commission to identify options for an improved service delivery model for implementation from April next year. We've engaged significantly with the sector on this programme and developing the service with them and getting their feedback on it, and this will continue in the coming months. BSS is the lead partner of the victims element of the Peace Programme, which is worth some €17.6 million, and is currently working on the second stage of that application, having already got through the first stage. The Peace funding will contribute to the development of an integrated health and well-being service with the voluntary community sector at its heart. And the aim of the funding is to build capacity within the sector to develop evidence-based interventions and to improve standards of delivery. And the aim is to have funding flowing from that Peace Programme by April next year. We continue, linked to that, to work closely with the sector and the Department of Health officials on a partnership agreement which will define the relationship between the voluntary community sector and the statutory sector on the mental trauma service, which was announced by the Minister for Health last year. And our aim there is to have an integrated service with referrals between the two parts. On historical institutional abuse, the public hearings led by Sir Anthony Hart are coming to an end, with the final module expected to finish in early July. We commend the Chair for how he has overseen the operation and conduct of the inquiry, which of course is entirely independent of the Department. The inquiry remains on track and within budget, with the final report expected in January 2017. The Executive will then consider the recommendations. Another critical arm's length body which the Department sponsors is the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland. The Commission is an independent public body established under the Northern Ireland Act 1998, and its role is the promotion of equality through a number of general duties. The Commission plays a key role in providing advice and support to individuals, employers, service providers and public authorities to meet the requirements of equality law and to encourage good practice. The Commission's budget has been agreed this year and its corporate and business plans are currently under development. Indeed, I understand you'll be receiving a presentation from the Commission after this session. Chair, thank you again for the opportunity to provide an overview of the Director's work across these areas, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much indeed. We'll start, as I say, with student monitoring. You're saying that around a third of the budget is dependent on in-year monitoring rounds. With your financial hat on, is that good practice?
Well, the reason for that is that those funds are held centrally by the Department of Finance. And the reason for that is because these funds are to be dispersed to a range of departments. They're done so, or they're allocated in that way on our advice. It can create at times some difficulties in that. But prior to the first monitoring round, some departments may not be clear about the funding that they're going to receive. But we've been able to get over those particular issues through close communication with the departments to give them assurances that the programme that they're taking forward has been agreed with the TEO, that we will make the recommendation in June monitoring and the money will be forthcoming. After that, the money then flows through the other monitoring rounds. In some cases, we're able to approve multi-annual programmes. So I think the system works. And we've been able to make it work.
When the ministers were before the committee a couple of weeks ago, First Minister said, quote, "I look forward to a positive and ongoing relationship with you, Chair, and with the committee." But the committee didn't receive any papers, Mark, with regard to June monitoring, which was announced to the Assembly. Do you think that contributes to a positive and ongoing relationship, not to provide us with papers and a briefing?
Well, I think, Chair, we always want to share as much as we can with the committee and ensure the committee is well briefed and up to speed on the issues across the sector. I think everyone will be aware of the different political relationship that we're in now with an executive and an opposition, and I understand that the Finance Minister addressed this issue in a statement on June monitoring when he indicated that we were moving towards a more streamlined approach in terms of dealing with finance, and that the new arrangements would consist of discussions between departments and the Department of Finance on the needs that were emerging. There would then be decisions taken on allocations. They would be communicated more broadly after they were agreed by the Executive, and that would form the basis on which we would discuss the implications with committees. And we're working within those current arrangements, which are still emerging, as you will appreciate.
Well, there may be an executive and an opposition in the chamber, but the committees are still the committees, still statutory committees. And the guidance from the Department of Finance says departments must ensure they engage fully with their assembly committees in respect of the in-year monitoring process. There should be early engagement with committees in order to establish their requirements.
Yes, I think that is the guidance that I haven't got it in front of me, that DFP have been putting together going forward. In this particular instance, as you know, we have previously made papers available. In this particular instance, the proposals were agreed by urgent procedure, which is not the way they are normally agreed, and unfortunately we weren't in a position to make that information available. And I would go back to the fact that the Finance Minister has set out a new arrangement, and that it will be on the basis of those discussions that departments have with the Department of Finance. What we can do with the committee, what we will seek to do, is to have a discussion prior to upcoming monitoring rounds about the needs that are emerging in the sector, so that we can have a discussion around those. But the actual financial discussions will remain confidential within the executive, is my understanding of the emerging process around this.
Previously, we were given knowledge of bids rather than successes. Why the change?
Well, I think, again, I would go back to the ministerial statement. The Minister of Finance talked about these new arrangements, and about the fact that there needs to be greater reality among the departments about what is achievable and what isn't, and there should be a proper discussion around needs that are emerging, and that an agreed position would be arrived at with those parties that are in the executive, and that is then what would be funded. That there wouldn't be a long list of bids, which quite often are no more than you'd say a wish list or whatever, but that are impractical. It's a new way of doing business, and that's what the Finance Minister had set out.
Well, it would be hard not to say that it is less open and transparent not to reveal the bids, but I take your point that some may feel that some ministers engaged in wish lists. Members, we'll stick to the June monitoring because I believe some members have questions. Christopher Stolford.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from the questions that were asked by the Chairman, in terms of the sharing of information regarding departmental bids and monitoring rounds, would you have some insight as to what the norm is in Westminster in regard to that? Do members of Parliament have sight of departmental bids in a monitoring round process?
I'm afraid I don't have the detail around that, although I know there have been some contact made, given the new political arrangements we're in, to see what the practices are there. And while I don't have the detail there, I suspect some of the new emerging arrangements are reflecting what happens there, but I couldn't tell you chapter and verse what the position is. Do you know, Stephen?
Well, Westminster, they have 3-year budget settlements, and the departments basically, they have only internal processes. They don't actually bid in the Treasury like Northern Ireland. It's a different system where basically the executive in Northern Ireland decide monitoring across all the departments. In GB, basically it's just done at department level. Department look after their own resources.
Within departments, in terms of, obviously there's going to be competing interests inside any given department, and there would be a similar bidding process, you know, Department of Transport or something like that. You know, somebody wants a road in Surrey and somebody wants, you know, a railway bridge in Manchester.
Yes.
You know, there's going to be a similar sort of bidding process, I presume, inside departments in terms of establishing where underspends go.
Well, part of the process, yes, absolutely. I mean, part of the process we have within departments is identifying emerging need.
Yeah.
And we look at that need, and we look at we prioritise that need. And we look at easements, and then we see, can we put some easements to that need, and if not, and is that sufficiently high priority, do we need to actually reduce expenditure elsewhere? That would be part and parcel of what we would normally do, and we'll continue to do going forward. I think what is different is about the process for the annual process, and indeed the 3-year process that's coming up now, in terms of the nature of the discussions that will be had. They will be around those emerging needs. They will be between departments and the Department of Finance. There will not be a long list of bids put forward in the way that they were in the past. There will be that discussion, and then there will be an agreed outcome. And this is part of what the executive thinks it is important to put forward as a common purpose of the new executive.
A more normalised politics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Members, anybody else on June monitoring? Oh, could you just run over the Ballykelly, the Shackleton Barracks figures for me again?
Yes.
Is the entire sort of 770 odd acres now sold?
Well, there were three lots. There was the element that went to Dard, and that has been sold to Dard. There was the element that was put on the open market, and that went to MJM Holdings for £1 million. And there's the other element then, the third lot that is going to Northern Water. And we're just discussing with them the precise valuation of that, but they're going to use that for the this integrated constructed wetland to deal with the waste from Ballykelly. So we expect that to be concluded shortly.
Right, you mentioned £1.5 million. Is that the overall from the three lots?
That's the overall. The MJM, the biggest lot, the MJM element was £1 million. The Dard element
110.
was 110, and the expected amount, the LPS valuation for the amount of DNA water is 390. So it comes to £1.5 million.
Right, now this site was gifted by the Ministry of Defence. Was that 2008?
I think, let me see. I think it was around that time, Chair. I'll find it in a sec.
Do you have to hand how much has been spent on the site since then?
No, we wouldn't have to. I wouldn't have to hand how much is spent on the site since then. But what I can say is that in terms of, I have some of the costs. The cost, it was costing us in the region of £400,000 to £500,000 to keep the site free from flooding and to maintain the security and so forth and any necessary health and safety on the site. So by selling the site, we have divested ourselves of that ongoing liability.
Right, so say at a conservative cost, if it was say 8 years ago, we've been spending around about £500,000 a year on it, so we've spent around £4 million. We've brought in £1.5 million. We've lost £2.5 million.
Well, just to clarify one point for you, Trevor, it was October 2011 was the date at which it was gifted.
Okay.
Well, in terms of the situation, the First and Deputy First Minister were very keen that value should be achieved from the site over and above the sale price. Originally, the intention was the MOD had put it on the market. There was a value, I think, of about £1.5 million. First and Deputy First took the view that more value could be got out of the site than that. They wanted to see jobs in this, and they wanted to see other benefits coming through from that. So we have now sold it for £1.5 million, admittedly a couple of years later. We have the jobs that the Department of Agriculture will be moving. So the Department of DERA, as it is now, will be moving up to there. We have the 100 jobs from MJM. And they have held out the prospect of that increasing to up to 1,000 jobs. And we have the integrated constructed wetland, which will not only deal with the waste from Ballykelly, but has the potential, because I've seen this in my agriculture days, for this to become an environmental asset where you have flora, you have fauna, you have nature walks, and you can make that open to the community. There's also a benefit to the community, because as part of the deal we required that there should be some investment for the benefit of the community, and there's going to be a refurbishment of a building on the site for community use. So I think on those range of elements, you can see the betterment that there has been through the sale at this point and the development in this way, as opposed to selling it a few years ago.
Well, I can see even adjusting to 2011 in 5 years that we've lost £1 million on the sale. Isn't there a principle that the polluter pays, and was that applied to the Ministry of Defence at the time it was gifted?
Well, the site was gifted to us with a survey which indicated what the extent of the issues were. So it was gifted to the executive with in knowledge of some of the potential contamination that there was, and in selling it on, we have sold it on to those who are taking it. Again, with those who are buying it and having knowledge of the extent of any contamination. The contamination hasn't been specifically dealt with. It's going to be dealt with by those who've taken the site on, but we believe most of the issues around that would be low level.
But that would have affected the sale price.
Well, I don't think that that was the key issue in affecting the sale price. It would have had some impact, obviously. The key issue, I think, in the sale price is the fact that a significant part of the land is low-lying and it floods unless you maintain the pumping, and also the fact that access is difficult. While the MOD could get away with limited access because, well, for a range of reasons, when it comes to opening up the site to development, you have to have proper access in and out. There are road requirements, and the costs around there are fairly significant, and that drives down the value of the site. And again, we work to the LPS valuation of the site. And the LPS valuation of the site was $1.5 million. So the value we got for the site was what the LPS was.
I would still argue that as there's a principle, the polluter pays, and there was clearly contamination, and that has dampened the price. It would have been better if the principle had been applied in 2011. However, we are where we are. Sean Lynch, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Just a matter of interest, Mark. See, when you're selling to a department, what financial transaction does DEFRA just write you a cheque?
Well, there is a transaction that would go through the books, but essentially it's circular money. It all remains government money.
Yeah.
But it does actually go through the books, and it would show in our books.
Yes, we had a receipt of 110,000 from DEFRA, and that was then
DERA, not DEFRA.
DERA, and then that was we surrendered that in the monitoring round to be reallocated for other projects.
But we didn't need it. We didn't need the capital receipt that we had got. It means it's made available for other departments. It goes back to the Department of Finance, and they reallocate it.
Atlantic Philanthropies came in with OFM, DFM to fund some signature programs under delivering social change, dementia, early intervention and shared education, Mark.
Yeah.
And yet 1.7 million has been transferred elsewhere within DSC, is that correct?
That's right.
Was that Atlantic Philanthropy money not match funding specifically for those three programs?
That's correct, Chair.
So how does this happen that we can take it out of that pot and put it somewhere else?
Well, because there were commitments entered into by the executive as part of the arrangement with Atlantic Philanthropies around co-funding. Those we identified those to the Department of Finance, and they indicated that given it was an executive commitment, that they would meet those, and they did that in a particular way by putting aside £8 million this year to meet those specific commitments, on top of the other money that's going to delivering social change of the 14 million resource and 15 million capital. So that 8 million was the extra for this year. Now that was based on a profile of expenditure. It'll actually be more than that over the course of a number of years, and the executive will meet the commitment. But the profile spend for this year was £8 million, and what we're basically saying is that in practice we don't need the full 8 million for the Atlantic Philanthropy funded elements of that this year, but we can use it within the wider elements of delivering social change for other projects. In fact, for SIF, because we are now rolling out the projects in SIF, and we actually have a demand that exceeds the annual amount that was previously available for SIF. So we're moving that money across to fund those extra projects coming out. It's all within DSC, although it was separately identified by DFP because they want to keep the annual amount for DSC at 14 million and 15 million. They recognised this Atlantic Philanthropy commitment, so they had to put some more money in to meet that, and they put it in as a separate amount. But in practice, it's really all part of the same pot.
But what does it mean for the delivery of the dementia, early intervention and shared education programs?
Well, we're taking those forward. It means that they will be taken forward to a different profile. So we expect the spend profile of that to change. Instead of being the amounts that were planned for this year, there will be more next year and the year after. And we're working with both health and education to get those programs up to speed and make sure that they realise the full value of the investment.
Which means they will be delivered more slowly than originally anticipated.
That's right.
So what message does that send to the beneficiaries?
Well, as we know with all of these projects, particularly these types of projects, I mean, the delivering social change, the clue is in that name. These are cutting edge projects. These are new approaches being developed in a range of areas, and the intention is that new practices are developed, piloted and trialled, and then mainstreamed into departmental business. So by their very nature, these aren't straightforward, and it takes time to work them out. So obviously, we have to profile expenditure. We have to make our best estimate of what the profile spend is going to be. We do that with the departments involved, but there can be issues involved in actually operationalising the projects. That's what's happened here. I believe in respect of dementia, some of the problems that they had there was in the recruitment of staff. If we go out to recruit and the staff aren't there, you have to then go out for further recruitment. You can't predict that. You can't know that that's going to be the case. These are some of the things you bump into when you're trying to take these projects forward. So there have been a couple of issues like that have meant that the profile hasn't been as was originally envisaged. Now, what we are doing is we are looking at what the possibility is of bringing in some additional projects to the DSE programme to ensure that we get maximise the spend that's available over the course of the next couple of years, while we continue to make sure that those existing ones, Dementia One and the shared education and so forth, are taken forward. I should say the other aspect about the education one, again, something we could not have predicted, was that there was industrial action around the assessment, and the engagement in assessment was a key part of the project, and that you had to demonstrate where the kids were starting from, what the impact of the project was. So therefore, assessment was a key part of the programme. There was industrial action in the education sector, which again was out with our control, and that delayed the recruitment of significant numbers of schools to the programme. So I say these are the sort of things that can come out of left field when we're trying to take these sort of programmes forward. And what we have to do is try and respond as best we can and reprofile and then ramp the programmes back up when we can. Thankfully, that I think the industrial action is largely resolved at this point, and we're going to be able to crank back up the shared education programme.
Now, I hear what you say, that these are cutting-edge programmes that started as pilots and then become mainstreamed. But the fact is that the literacy project, which at least anecdotally was deemed to be a huge success, was not mainstreamed. And as you know from previous discussions, the signature project on play and leisure, which was heralded in October 13 with 1.6 million of a budget, never actually existed.
Well, a couple of the early signature programmes were a mixture of those programmes that were a new approach and were impact programmes. So if you take the numeracy and literacy approach, there was a very significant impact on those young people and the teachers who took part in that. And the Department of Education has identified the best learning and practice out of that and has disseminated that across the sector. So in that sense, the learning from that and the benefits of that have been mainstreamed, but it's correct to say the programme as it was going forward has not been taken forward in the same way, but the benefits are there. And the second phase of projects, we have been working very closely to ensure that in the design that mainstreaming is built in as far as is possible. I have to say that in this is always subject to the other pressures that departments face. I mean, departments face a whole range of projects. They want to mainstream some of things, but they can't always do that and meet some of the other pressures they have. That's the reality that we face. But in particular, some of the health programmes, the early intervention transformation projects, there's very cutting-edge work being done there, which is changing actual practice. It's piloting new models of practice and then building that practice into the way the current services are delivered. So in that sense, there shouldn't be an ongoing cost, and it's easier then to build that in to and mainstream it going forward. And there are a number of other projects like that. When we look at the dementia programme, it's about guiding people better to the services that are available. So they are recruiting dementia navigators, for example, making people more aware of what is there, and also training up practitioners in some of the early signs, some of the early indicators, and guiding them as to what services are available. And those are things that will continue on. So I think the benefits of the DSE programme are being carried through into departmental programmes.
Okay. Back to Atlantic Philanthropies, and there's 2.6 million, I think, of Resourcedale remaining. Is that for this financial year or for the lifetime of the programmes?
That's for the current financial year, and it'll be mainly for the Department of Education programme, because they didn't draw down any money in the June monitoring round because they're in the process of still looking at the profiles for the spend in the current year.
And would it be right, from what we've heard, to assume that there's no guarantee that there won't be further monitoring round adjustments? That money may go to other DSC projects?
Well, I think they could well, Chairman. The point of having monitoring around is precisely to allow for those adjustments, given that we can't predict perfectly what the spend profiles are going to be or how projects are going to go. So I expect there will be some further adjustments as are necessary, but what we'll be trying to do is to make sure that we get the programmes back to ensure that they meet the full spend that was intended for them and that the resource is used as fully as possible.
You've 7.4 million for covering a wide range of shared future measures. Given we're discussing TBUC next week, would it be possible to have a breakdown of that 7.4 million figure ahead of next Wednesday?
Yes, happy to provide that, Chair. Yeah.
You've declared a reduced requirement of 6 million in financial transaction capital in respect of Ebrington. Why was that, Mark? Just remind us.
Well, we had been in discussion with the Department of Finance about the development of Grade A office accommodation in Ebrington. And again, that's another complex project which brings in a whole range of issues. And our initial assessment had been that we might be able to have some spend this year, and DFP indicated that, or DOF as it now is, indicated that financial transaction capital could be made available for that, and they provided that to us. But our assessment at the moment of the progress that and the likely spend on that is that we're not going to be in a position this year to avail of that financial transactions capital because the project won't be at that stage of development, and we have ease that back to Department of Finance so they can reallocate it elsewhere.
What's your assessment of the Executive's ability to spend financial transaction capital? Would it be unfair to say it's poor?
I'm not sure I could comment across the full Executive. I think you would need to speak to Department of Finance officials on that, but certainly there's been significant spend which has gone through our books, for example for the University of Ulster and for Queen's. So very significant expenditure there. I think is it 35?
No, it's about 70.
Between the two.
Yes, across the two projects.
Across 70 million. So there's an example of significant expenditure. But FTC really requires particular types of projects. I mean, there's a private funded element to this. These are really essentially loans that have to be paid back. So it's not for pure public sector expenditures. It's more for the private sector element, and largely it's of benefit to fairly significant projects. So it does have some limitations around its use, but it is an important tool.
You do, OFM, DFM did have, I think, the second highest percentage underspend of all departments, both in terms of ring-fence capital and resource. Any suggestions as to why that would have been?
Yes, well, the position underspend this year was disappointing, and there were a range of reasons for it, because we worked very hard to try and stay very tight on our monitoring of spend and try and make sure that we're able to deliver programmes. The reality is, though, as the more programmes you take on and the more that those are capital, the more you're at the mercy of some of the vagaries of the things that you can run into. So in terms of the sort of issues that we had, we had some administration cost underspend within the department. Those were things like lower than anticipated ministerial travel, lower than anticipated depreciation charges. We had some issues around reduced salary costs, not because we didn't need posts, but because given the restructuring, the VES and everything that was happening, there was no recruitment happening, so there was some underspend there. In terms of the resource spend, there was a late declaration of lower than anticipated running costs for the historic institutional abuse inquiry. There was lower than anticipated spend in urban villages. And again, lower than anticipated running costs in some of the bureau in Beijing, Washington and Brussels. And some issues around legacy accruals in race relations and in good relations. So there were a range of things that made up that underspend. But I accept, Chair, it was disappointing, and we have identified a range of things that we're going to do to make sure that our performance gets back to where it was before, which was among the best of the departments.
Okay, thank you. Stuart Dixon.
Thank you. Apologies for being a few moments late at the beginning of the committee. Can I take you back, Mark, to the Delivering Social Change funding that we were talking about, and the services that it's intended or were intended to provide? Is the reality that Delivering Social Change and either the Executive's Office funding or indeed Atlantic Philanthropies funding is in fact what might be described as Grand Old Duke of York funding that's leading departments and projects up to the top of the hill and then dumping them when they get there, because the reality is whenever the project or the pilot is over, there is no resource to actually continue the work thereafter. I mean, I think probably the most obvious one has to be in relation to support for literacy and numeracy in schools, primarily in primary schools, and I'm certainly seeing across my constituency, and I'm sure others around the table are saying exactly the same thing. The teachers that are delivering these services are now having to go back into the classroom. They can't deliver them. There's no budget to deliver them. There's no resource in the school to deliver them. You created expectation and then you dashed it.
Well, I wouldn't accept that characterisation.
It's the reality.
Well, I wouldn't accept the characterisation, although I do accept that there have been some difficulties in maintaining some of the programmes. The whole purpose of delivering social change was to identify different ways of doing things that could then be mainstreamed. And I explained, I think in my earlier answer to the Chair, I give some examples of where funding had been set aside, a project had been put in place, working with practitioners to develop new approaches. For example, right across Northern Ireland, every baby that's born now will be assessed in a different way, and their needs will be met in a different way as a consequence of an early intervention transformation project funded under Delivering Social Change, which has changed practice out in the health sector. That is mainstream from the outset. And what we've said in Delivering Social Change is the sort of projects we want to come forward are those that are capable of identifying that new practice and capable of being mainstreamed, and we do our best from the outset to ensure that they can be mainstreamed. But in some cases, it really does depend on the other pressures that departments face, and that is the reality we have to face in this.
And therefore, does that mean that those babies that are guaranteed that when they get to nursery and to primary school, that there won't be the numeracy and literacy support that they require, even though it's been identified as a requirement, even though it might even be funded in very early years? The reality is that these are vanity projects leading departments and organisations up the hill and then leaving them standing there with little or no resource to actually carry through into what you describe as mainstreaming. It's not mainstreaming, it's main failing.
Well, I think we have to, I mean, I reiterate, the purpose of the programme is to identify new ways of doing things. If we continue doing things in the same ways, we get the same results, and in a constraining financial climate, we will actually get poorer results if we don't change the way we do things. The purpose of Delivering Social Change is to allow that space for practitioners to identify new ways of doing things and build them into the mainstream, so it's built into existing practice. And that can be done at low cost or no cost on an ongoing basis. And those are the types of characteristics we seek when we ask for proposals for the Delivering Social Change programme. And I think some projects have met those sort of criteria better than others, but in particular the more recent ones that we have supported have very much met that criteria and are making a real difference in departmental mainstream practice.
Just finally, Chair Askin, there seems to be some acceptance that some do work and others clearly will not work. We might argue about the reasons why they won't work. I think they don't work because insufficient planning has gone into delivering the mainstream financing to deliver that change. We're all agreed that these changes are good and they need to be piloted, but will there be an examination at the end of the day to see where they failed, how they failed, why they failed, and to learn from that experience?
Well, I wouldn't accept the term failure. I don't think they have failed. I don't think even the example that was taken is a failure. The numeracy and literacy programme, which both yourself and the Chair have referred to, benefited thousands of children. Those children ended up with improved GCSE results. They ended up with better Key Stage 2 results. Their life has changed as a consequence of that. So that is a major impact. And the other point is that the committee, the department has also built that into practice.
I accept that change has taken place, but the reality is that today that service isn't there any longer. There is no numeracy and literacy support inside schools. There is no special needs support inside schools because there's no budget. There's no money.
Well,
you raised expectations and then you failed.
There's not the same numerous industries supporting schools. Clearly, there's numerous industries supporting schools. Clearly, there's special educational needs in schools.
Well, tell that to teachers in my schools.
But there
in
may
my
not be.
constituency.
There are obviously pressures in those areas. But I mean, delivering social change is not of itself designed to resolve all of the issues that there are across all departments. It's designed to provide the space to develop new approaches that will give better outcomes and hopefully do it either at the same cost or less cost. That's the purpose of the scheme.
Yield.
Okay, I'd like to touch on arm's length bodies. Now, Mark, as you said, the departmental budget is about 50-50 between yourself as a department and the ALBs. How are they reacting to the challenge of 3.4% efficiencies?
Well, I should say, Chair, that 3.4% is the average that's been applied, the same that was applied to the department. It has varied across the arm's length bodies. And in assessing the sort of reductions that we would apply to the arm's length bodies, we asked them for the effect of different levels of reduction. And the impact it would have on their capacity to deliver their statutory duties, and their capacity to carry forward their programmes. And on the basis of looking at the returns we got, we then applied differential reductions, which averaged out at 3.44%. There's no doubt that it's not easy for arm's length bodies. It's not easy for any bodies dealing with reduced funding. The key thing that bodies have to do is to focus on their statutory responsibilities and make sure that they are delivered. What a number of the arm's length bodies have done successfully, although the potential for this going forward is clearly reducing, is to look at things like their premises costs, for example. Can they renegotiate their lease? Can they move and share buildings with other arm's length bodies? And I think our office has been, and the arm's length bodies that are within our boundary, have been very successful in working together to do that. There's a number of them have come together in Equality House, for example. VSS moved to Sedum House, moved to at reduced cost. So we've squeezed out quite a lot of reduced cost without impacting on service by doing that. But clearly you can only move so many times. There's also been the opportunity for the arm's length bodies to avail of the voluntary exit scheme, and a number of them did that to a limited extent. So there was some benefit for that. But again, that is limited in our sector by the fact that a lot of the bodies are very small. And a number of them were only created fairly recently and wouldn't necessarily have people who are at the stage in their career where they feel they would be able to take voluntary exit. But we think across the piece, despite the reduction, that in the main, with some difficulty, the arm's length bodies have been able to maintain their services. Certainly, we meet with them regularly, and if there's any serious issues emerging, we would expect those to be brought to our attention.
3.4 is an average, resulting from a process which was basically a judgment call by yourselves. How did you do that, and what was your evidence base?
Well, we did it in a couple of ways. As I say, we asked, first of all, the effect of, I think it was 5%, 10%, was it?
Yes.
5 and 10. Right. We put a couple of scenarios there, what would be the effect of a reduction of this sort. And then we assessed the information we got back from the bodies. And we met with them to discuss the implications of that. We looked at, for example, the size of the body, because that is important. When you have a very small body whose expenditure is almost entirely on staff, well, there's very, very few areas you can actually go to reduce expenditure. So we took that into account. We took into account the extent to which they could avail of the voluntary exit scheme in the way I just described. And we also looked at what the reductions had been in the previous year. And taking that together, we made an assessment of what we felt was reasonable. That was presented to the arm's length body. We got their views on it, and then ministers agreed the reductions.
And the non-financial bottom line was, will this impact on the ALB's ability to perform its statutory duties? As we bring them in and hear evidence from them, is any likely to say to us, we are in danger of not being able to fulfil our statutory obligations?
Well, I would hope not. I think that what might happen, I'm sure, you cannot, it's very difficult to reduce funding without there being some impact on the service provided in some way. We have to be realistic about that. Although there can be ways of delivering service in different ways which can help to mitigate any reduction in funding. But we have been very focused on, in our discussion with ALBs, indicating to them that they should focus on their statutory duties, and if there's any impact on the statutory duties or a threat to statutory duties, to draw it to our attention. In some cases, you may find that the arm's length bodies can't provide the same level of service, but that level of service may be above and beyond what's actually required in statute. It may be something that is beneficial, it may be something that people enjoy, but it may not. It may be above and beyond what's required in statute, and it's in that space that we're playing here when we're looking at what the possibility is for reductions.
A pretty tight space.
It depends. It can be. It depends also on whether the other avenues that I mentioned have been exhausted for reducing costs, whether it be in travel, whether it be in premises costs, or whatever.
And as a department, you have a 3.4% cut in the salary budget. Is that absorbed by the fact you're smaller?
No, it's absorbed right across the department. I mean, to some extent, it's been absorbed by the fact that we have been carrying vacancies. It would be absorbed by the fact that we would curtail spend in a range of areas. So, I mean, we go through broadly a similar process to what the arm's length bodies do in trying to stay within a restricted budget.
And the disposal, said earlier, the disposal of Shackleton saved us 400,000 running costs a year, so that helped towards our reductions in the current year as well.
Reduce our outgoings, so that saved us 400k.
A question about the HIA. The budget will come on to the workings of the Historical Institutional Abuse Inquiry later, as discussed. But in budgetary terms, there's an estimated outturn of 3.4 million for this financial year against a budget of 5. So what's going on there?
Well, the original budget was set by DFP on our Department of Finance on the basis of anticipated progress with the programme going forward. In practice, and I'll let Ricky come in the detail of this, Judge Hart has managed that very, very effectively. It hasn't been. It's not the case that he has curtailed his activities. He has carried out the modules he was meant to carry out. He's carried out the inquiry in exactly the way he would expect to carry it out, and he has done that exercising his independent judgment. So there's been no pressure on him to reduce costs in any sense. This is just a reduced requirement against the budget that was set out there. Do you want to say anything about that, Ricky?
Yes, of course. This is the last year of the inquiry itself and the public hearings, and the public hearings come to an end early July. So the costs will significantly ramp down during the second half of the financial year. There still will be some costs. I think the other factor as well is in relation, as Mark said, to how the budget has been managed by Stratney, which has been, he's been very clear and strong on that. There's been very clear rules around legal costs and how they will be supported. So as the inquiry has progressed, the inquiry have been able to provide more detail around their profiled expenditure.
Well, he is, as we all recognise, working as an independent inquiry, but I think it is also legitimate to listen to those victims and survivors who have expressed displeasure, shall we say, at the lack of independent legal advice being made available, but I don't think it's something we necessarily need to discuss at this meeting. When will the 15-16 annual report and accounts be available, and what's the plan for engagement with the committee?
We're expecting the Auditor and Controller General to sign off the accounts towards the end of next week, and we'll be laying them before the summer recess to the Assembly. And at that stage we would be wanting to engage with the committee, so likelihood it will be in the September meeting.
I think I'm right in saying the last couple of years has been either a meeting or a phone call between you and
Yes.
me, and you know, this is an all-new committee, and he needs to take a view whether that's acceptable.
Well, if we can engage earlier on that basis, Chair, we're happy to do that.
Well, we have one more meeting, which is next Wednesday, and Stephen's indicating it'll be the end of next week.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the timetable really out with our control, and it depends on when it's ready and the accounts are complete.
They're all still ongoing.
Yeah. It's an issue. I'm not pointing a finger. I'm just saying
And
this
Just
happens.
the timings.
every
We're
year.
happy to be flexible, Chair. If there's some other way of meeting with yourself or some members of the committee outside your normal session, we're happy to do that.
I mean, I have to point it out too, because it is an all-new committee in terms
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
members. Is there anything else in the finances? Because I think that's me ready to move on to discussing victims and survivors. We're all content. Great. Okay, so on victims and survivors, as we know, there was a 10-year strategy published in 2009. We're in 2016. Any plans for a mid-term or post-mid-term evaluation?
The Commission has commenced work on a mid-term review of the 10-year victims and survivor strategy, so that is currently ongoing.
Well, why is it being done by the Commission?
The Commission has responsibility in terms of providing advice to ministers on policy issues in relation to victims and survivors.
But they're also part of the strategy.
That's correct. The Commission, I understand, are coming here next week and can probably provide more detail around the process, but they have procured consultants to carry out the review of the strategy, and that's currently underway.
They would be part of the evaluation. So you're confident that whoever they employ will criticise the Commission if the Commission needs to be criticised?
Well, that's a matter for the Commission. They have gone out for they've gone out to the market to procure, and they have identified a provider, and that provider has been engaging with a number of stakeholders on the strategy, including the department.
Do you think at this stage, Ricky, is it possible to say whether you think there will need to be a need for strategy post-2019?
I think you asked that question of Oliver and Margaret last week in the Victim Service, and I think they indicated that there may be a need. You'll probably ask the Commissioner next week. I think to ask the department at this stage, I would say there probably will be a need for a strategy. Yep.
Okay. What will be the impact of the Stormont House / Fresh Start agreement? Has there been any noticeable impact?
In terms specifically of Fresh Start or the Stormont House agreement?
Either or.
Well, the Commissioner could articulate this better in terms of the reaction from the victim sector in terms of the Fresh Start agreement. However, a lot of work has been going on in the sector following the Stormont House agreement and the commitments that were made there. A number of things have been taken forward in relation to mental trauma service, advocacy work in preparation for the Peace 4 application, and we've continued with a good programme of collaborative design with the sector to try and improve services generally. So there's been a lot of positive work in the last 12-18 months.
What about the proposal for a pension for the physically injured?
Well, that is a commitment in the Stormont House agreement. We had in the department done some work after the agreement in terms of the mechanics of how a pension might work. Of course, that's a matter which is currently under consideration now following the Fresh Start agreement.
When you say mechanics, are you talking about a number of options?
No, it's more in relation to how such a pension would be funded, whether it would be a defined benefit, what the impact would be on other things. So those sort of mechanics around pension operation.
And what about those who might be the beneficiaries of the pension?
How do you mean?
Have you taken a view on who would benefit?
No, we
Who
hadn't got
qualify,
in.
rather?
No, there had been no discussion around eligibility.
Okay, Stuart Dixon again, Stuart.
Sure, I just wanted to check the response that you got to the mid-term or late mid-term review. The department, the executive office, is not undertaking a review. It's the commission itself that's undertaking the review. Is that
The
correct?
Commission is carrying out the mid-term review, has
Of it?
commissioned a
A
mid-term review
of itself.
of the
Yeah.
victim strategy, of which we are all a part, including the Victims Forum.
Yeah, but you don't actually have an interest yourselves in conducting a review.
Well, on matters in relation to policy and the adequacy and effectiveness of services and policy advice, it sits within the statutory responsibility of the Victims Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the same issue, with regard to the outside consultant that's been retained in terms of carrying out the review, do you know who that is?
The name, no, the name escapes me. Probably best to put that to the Commission next week.
Okay. And with regard to the terms of reference of the review, did the department have any sort of sign-off on those terms of reference, or was it the Victims Commission itself that... I can see where this is going to go. You're going to tell me to ask him next week. Did he have any... did the department have any role in terms of defining the terms of reference for the review?
Certainly the Commission has engaged with the department on the terms of reference, yes. Right,
okay. In terms of you described positive work taking place with regard to the mental trauma service as a consequence of a fresh start at Stormont House. Would you be able to provide the committee with some information in terms of what that positive work has been?
Well, I think it's important to say from the outset that it is being led by Department of Health officials on the back of the previous Health Minister's announcements, which were made in 2015 and early 2016. Obviously, we have been engaging heavily with their officials and the Health and Social Care Board in terms of making sure that it's suitable and adequate and meets the needs of victims and survivors. We see this as a very positive development. I understand Health have allocated funding to it. We've worked very closely with them to come up with a model which is effectively an integrated model between the statutory services and the voluntary and community sector. It's important that the voluntary community sector is recognised in terms of the level of support that it provides to victims in terms of health and wellbeing and social support. So we see that at the heart of any model which is devised. So we're actually defining what we call a partnership agreement at the minute, and that will be very clear in terms of the roles and responsibilities between the various sectors and the referral protocols for how victims and their needs will be met.
And in terms of there's been an increase in positive work, has there been an increase in positive feedback from people availing of the service?
Well, the service itself isn't operational. So if Department of Health officials, of course, it's within their responsibility to actually recruit the clinicians who will be providing services which are for people with high intensity needs. However, we are of course continuing to fund groups through the Victims and Survivors Service who have been for a number of years and are continuing to provide health and wellbeing support now to victims and survivors who present to them.
Yes.
So that is ongoing, and there is a lot of support that's happening at the minute.
I think there's two aspects, maybe getting these confused. There's the support that's coming through Piece 4 and the mental health trauma to try and bring the two together. The Piece 4 looking after the voluntary community element and developing the skills there and referral methods, and the Department of Health dealing with the mental health trauma, bringing those two together to have an integrated service which is 5 steps in it, and people can, depending on what their needs are assessed and dealt with either in the voluntary community sector or in the mental health trauma element, and can be referred up.
Yes.
But there's also the other work, I think, that you may have been thinking of, which is the co-design work that's been ongoing with the Victim and Survivor Service about the existing services and how they might be developed. You might want to say something about that, Ricky.
I mean, what I'm trying to drive at, Chair, is if there's additional... The phrase that was used was positive work. I just want to know if it's having a positive impact.
I mean,
for the victims and survivors.
I think that's just to pick up on that point. In terms of improvements that have been more generally for services for victims, and I'm conscious that a lot of new members here may not be aware of that detail. We've worked very closely with VSS and the Victims Commission and the sector and the forum over the last 18 months to bring in greater flexibility to address victims' needs, to improve the monitoring and evaluation of impact, to look at more outcome-focused conversations with victims, and I think Margaret and Oliver touched on that last week. And that's been evidenced through reduced levels of complaints, for example, within VSS. And VSS has been able to react very quickly to victims' needs, so there's been a lot of success.
Okay, thank you.
Ricky, I have to go back to this review of the strategy. And first of all, I accept that the department is part of the strategy. I've often talked about the cardinal points, as it were. You have the department, the commission, the forum, and the service. So I get it if you're implying, if you're criticising the Commission for being in charge of the review, you could equally criticise the department if it was in charge of the review. But what about the Department of Finance? What about PEDU, Performance and Efficiency Delivery Unit? Is it not still on the go?
I don't know, Chair.
You know, when the Finance Minister of the day, Peter Robinson, announced that he said some people might consider a PEDU review as a threat, let me be clear, the only threat will be to inefficiency and poor performance. Those who care about public services, and I'm sure all my executive colleagues are in that group, will welcome PEDU's involvement. Surely this is just meat and drink to PEDU.
Well, I think, Chair, I mean, the strategy is there for, it's Minister strategy. The role of the Commissioner is to provide independent advice to us on the level of services to victims and how effectively the sector is working, or what the needs of victims are, and to do that through the forum and so forth. It is a Minister's strategy. So they will provide that advice to us as to how they see the strategy progressing. We will take that advice along with other ministerial considerations in deciding how best the strategy should be revised going forward. But it is their role to provide us with that advice. That's why they were set up, and that is their role to do that.
Yeah, I remember the Commissioner has 6 statutory duties, including to review the law, the delivery of services and all the rest, and offer advice. But surely somebody has to take a view of how well the Commissioner is providing that advice. To allow the Commissioner to appoint the people who will do the review sounds like a conflict of interest to me. And when you have something like PEDU in the Department of Finance, and the quote I've just given you from the Minister who set it up, surely that is a much more neutral way to do business.
Well, perhaps we should disentangle the two. I mean, there is a strategy here for the sector. The role of the Commissioner is to give us advice, give us policy advice on how the services are being delivered and how the policy is meeting the needs of victims, and that will inform the review of the strategy. And any adjustments will be made by ministers. If there's a concern, I don't know if you're articulating such a concern about the performance of the Commissioner, then we'd have to look at what the appropriate mechanism would be to assess the role of the Commissioner in discharging her duties. Well, I don't know if that is what you're saying, but I mean, her role is to give us advice on the strategy, how it's coming forward. We take that advice, we talk to ministers, and then we adjust the strategy accordingly. She clearly has a role to play, but I'm not aware of any concerns about the way that's being discharged, and if there were any, then we would have to look at the appropriate mechanism for getting that assessment. And
I put on record, I am not making any criticism or suggesting that the Commissioner is not performing her role to good effect. What I'm suggesting is it would look more open, transparent, and there would be no question of the accusation of a conflict of interest if it was done in a neutral way. And I presume what you want is a review of the strategy that says the cardinal points are the right things, the right bits of architecture to deliver for victims, but also that they are working well, or that they could work better if we did A rather than B, X rather than Y.
Well, I think the advice that we'll get from the Commissioner through the consultants that they are appointing will give us a sense of whether their services are being delivered appropriately, and if there's a need for any particular, if there's any concerns are raised about those cardinal points as you describe.
Okay. Historical institutional abuse inquiry. We've already made the point and acknowledged that Sir Anthony's evidential sessions are about to come to an end. He's due to report in January of 2017. Do we then have a timetable within the department for consideration of that report and any recommendations that he may make?
There's no firm timetable set out, Chair. We will receive Sir Anthony's recommendations and we will give those the appropriate consideration, and the Executive will want to take a view on them.
Would you accept that could quite easily be deemed to be a very disappointing position if you were a victim or survivor who have been waiting potentially decades for the results to be published, for recommendations to be made, and for the executive to take action.
But we're absolutely seized of the fact that many victims have been waiting a long time for some resolution around these issues, and I know that ministers will be keen to arrive at conclusions and to make recommendations as soon as possible. But as I think probably the rest of this evidence session has demonstrated, were I to, without having knowledge of what the recommendations are going to be, how difficult they are going to be to implement, to set a time frame up, I would be putting my neck in the noose somewhat. So I think we will want to make as rapid progress as we can, and because of the reasons you've just described, at this point we couldn't put a timetable on it because we don't know what the recommendations are going to be or how difficult they're going to be to implement.
There was a proposal for an interdepartmental working group led by Health in respect of the mother and baby homes. Was that set up?
I understand Health are in the process of setting that up. I think that's probably a question more for them to answer, whether it has been set up or not.
So if I were to ask you whether you think it's going to report within the 6 months as planned, you wouldn't be able to answer that?
I don't think we would be in a position to answer that.
I think again Health would have to respond on that.
Yeah.
Do you have any information about the work being undertaken by the Safeguarding Board?
Well, we are working with Department of Health officials on that executive, the outworkings of that executive decision, and that remains the case.
So why? You seem to be working with the Department of Health on one initiative but not on the other?
Well, we will be working with them on both, of course, because there may be lessons learned from the current inquiry which we will want to bring and inform the work that they'll be doing.
The Safeguarding Board, of course, looking at clerical abuse that occurred outside of the institutional setting.
Any further inquiries, we'd be out with the current terms of reference for the current inquiry, yes.
Okay. Mark, on the programme for government, we understand the Department of Finance have provided their statutory committee with a draft timetable for the forthcoming budgetary process. Would it be possible for you to give this committee a timetable in terms of the programme for government process with the key points, key actions and key dates?
Yes, Chair, I think we could bring that to you next week. It will be very close. I'm just looking at the draft budget timetable. The intention is that the programme for government, along with the draft budget, along with the investment strategy, the economic strategy and the proposed social statement or social strategy would be brought together at the same time because they link to each other. So the intention around the programme for government is that it would go out for consultation in the autumn, and decisions would be taken by December, which is broadly similar to the time frame for the consultation on the budget, because these things have to, all these documents have to align, but we can bring you the chapter and verse next week.
That would be most useful. Members? All done? Okay. Mark, then, just to be clear in terms of what's coming our way before or by next Wednesday, that draft timetable?
Yep.
A breakdown of the 7.4 million on shared futures, all those measures. A third thing I would like to ask for, though you may not be in a position to accede to the request, would it be possible to have a written paper on the June monitoring round, including the bids made by TEO?
Well, I think I'm not going to be able to accede to that, Chair, because as I explained, that wasn't the process. But what we could certainly give you is a written paper on the outcome of June monitoring and the implications for the department.
Okay. Mark, Ricky and Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, we go straight to our second and final briefing of the day. This is the Equality Commission. Clark's brief is at page 118. the relevant extracts from the Executive Office Departmental Overview and Key Issues paper begins at page 120. And the Equality Commission have provided some information. I'm afraid that's entabled, beginning at page 7. So, we welcome Keith Brown, who's Head of Corporate Services, Darren McKinstry, the Director of Policy and Research, and Eileen Lavery is Head of Advice and Compliance. And you're in the middle, so does that mean you're speaking first?
No, it doesn't.
No, I'm on the right, so it's going to be me, Chairman.
Okay, right winger, okay, making all that members. Okay.
Have we start? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, we have.
Yeah. First of all, just thank you for the invitation to brief you on the role and the work of the Commission. The Chairman's already made the introductions. Eileen is responsible for most of the operational work we do, the legal services work, the advice and compliance work. Darren is our Director of Policy, so it's policy, research, the law reform agenda that we have, and also a lot of the work with the key stakeholders, with government departments on the various equality strategies and issues like that. And we'll collectively deal with hopefully any questions that you have today. First of all, I'll say we look forward to working with assisting the committee over the coming mandate. I think with the reduced executive office, I think possibly that an ALB like ourselves that we may be called to talk to you maybe more frequently than we have, so we're happy to do that. I am going to follow the 2-page briefing, basically that presented to you, and I know through the clerk we've advised you that basically our apologies that Michael Wardlow is currently on annual leave and our Chief Executive had a prior commitment. The remit that we have is actually very wide-ranging. I think if you look at the 2-page briefing, you probably already see it from that. So if there are areas of further information that you want more information about following the meeting, we'll certainly be happy to liaise through the clerk to get that to you. The Commission is an arm's-length body established under the Northern Ireland Act, which is Westminster legislation. Though most of the legislation that we operate has historically been responsible through OFM, DFM, and certainly we are sponsored by the Executive Office, and that has continued to be the case. There's been equality legislation in Northern Ireland really since the mid-70s. You know, the equal pay, the work of the Equal Opportunities Commission, and in various iterations fair employment. We also took over the responsibilities in 1998 of the Northern Ireland Disability Council and the Commission for Racial Equality, which were established in the mid to late 90s. Over that period, basically the period since we've been in operation, in addition to basically the various pieces of what are called the anti-discrimination provisions and the Northern Ireland Act, we've also had the addition of the legislation relating to sexual orientation and race to age, and various changes made to the overall remit in areas like disability. We are also responsible for, jointly with the Human Rights Commission, for the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, really from 2009 onwards. Thankfully, I'm not going to go through all the detail on the legislation basically that's included in the briefing. What we would say is basically that there are some differences in scope and coverage between the various bits of legislation. There are some gaps basically between ourselves and Great Britain, which really have arisen since the Equalities Act was basically passed in Great Britain in 2010. If I focus on the work that's common, there are differences between the various bits of legislation. If I focus on the work that's common, we have a duty to promote equality of opportunity and also affirmative action, but only affirmative action under fair employment. So that's one of the anomalies between the various different pieces of legislation. A big area of our duties basically is to work towards the elimination of unlawful discrimination and harassment. We promote good relations between persons of different racial groups, which technically is the only good relations duty that's actually placed on the Commission. That the general good relations duties, the flow from Section 75, are really duties that are placed on public authorities. We've also a duty to encourage good practice in relation to disability. We oversee the effectiveness of the statutory equality and good relations duties on public authorities, and we have various obligations to them in relation to them and individuals in relation to the provision of advice. for advice. And we have a general duty to keep the legislation under review. How we do this is, the thing that people, certainly the general public, are probably the most aware of is that we provide advice and assist individuals with potential complaints of discrimination. We also do a lot of work basically in assisting employers, service providers and public authorities in terms of meeting their obligations under equality law and encouraging good practice. We oversee the fair employment monitoring provisions and also the workforce reviews that we're called Article 55 reviews. And we have various bits of enforcement and investigatory powers in relation to fair employment in the other areas. We do the other things that basically we're empowered to do, in things like providing research, educational activities, working with policymakers. And as I said, we do make basic recommendations relating to changes to the law. And generally we use a combination of our powers in how we do that. Basically it's not all carrot and it's not all stick. I'm not going to go into too much about basically the relationship with the department in terms of as an ALB. We're an ALB set up like basically all other ALBs with financial memorandum. We have a management statement. We provide our corporate plan, our draft corporate and business plans to the department, and they're really driven by the legislation that we operate under, but also they can input in terms of their wider executive aims and also particularly areas like the programme for government. And at the end of the day, those corporate plans and business plans have to be approved by the Executive Office and the ministers there. The area that we're slightly different, I think, is because of the Westminster legislation, it's the Secretary of State who's actually responsible for appointing our commissioners. So although we report operationally to the Executive Office, the Secretary of State responsibilities for the work of appointing the commissioners, and she has an obligation to, as far as practical, basically provide a group of commissioners which are broadly representative of the Northern Ireland community. So that's one of our obligations. We currently have a 4-day-a-week chair, a deputy chair and 14 other commissions who come from a fairly diverse background in terms of the experiences they actually bring to the job, in terms of actually the political values basically that they all hold. Our commissioners, although they come from different walks of life, may represent sectional interest or have affiliations with various political groupings, they're appointed to the Equality Commission as Equality Commissioners, first and foremost Equality Commissioners, and not as representatives of business, public sector, local government, whatever. The Commission's budget this year is £5.75 million. I know there's some discussions with Mark Brown about the cuts. Our cut this year was 7%, so we're one of the bigger ALBs, and that equates to this year just over £400,000. We currently have a staff of 88 full-time equivalent employees who carry work right across our whole range of responsibilities. Not only this year, but really over the past 7 years, we've seen a reduction in both budget and in staffing terms. And the sort of scale of that is that roughly about 7 years ago, our budget would have been closer to 7.2, just over £7 million. And basically our staffing level, I think about 7 years ago, was 138. So that's a 36% reduction in staffing numbers really over the past 7 years. To pick up sort of the Mark's discussion, it wouldn't be the case, then maybe if you want to explore that it means that we cannot deliver our statutory responsibilities. We will always put those first, but it does inevitably have an impact on how we deliver those responsibilities and the way and the work that we can do with regard to that. Again, as Marcus says, we do use voluntary exit schemes, and we have for the past few years. So we have 23 staff who have left the organisation in the past 2 years through voluntary exit. And our forecast is basically we will lose another anywhere between 3 and 8 staff really going forward in terms of certainly this year into next year. There are things that we do to try and mitigate the impact of those budget reductions. So we will generate about £360,000 this year from further sharing of Equality House. We now share Equality House with Nicky, with Cockney, with CVS, and from start of this year with the Community Relations Council. We also do offer shared services to those organisations. So primarily their IT, we actually run by and large their IT, as well as the Human Rights Commission. Our corporate plan, our current corporate plan, we've just finished with a consultation, and it is now with the Executive Office for approval, so it's being looked at currently. And really the 4 strategic areas that we have there are what I call championing equality and good relations, which is really around the communication side we do and the contact that we have in terms of trying to encourage basic change. The challenging of inequalities, which is really the policy and research side of what we do. Putting the legislation to work, which is really the core service, the things that we deliver in terms of the complaints that we support and the advices we give, and the corporate services side of delivering equality effectively and efficiently. In terms of the work programme for this year, in addition to the operational work we do on a day and daily basis, some of the things that we'll be doing over the next 12 months are, first of all, we'll be updating our public awareness and stakeholder service, which I think the last time was done was 2011, and I think we did appear before a previous committee with regard to that. We're reviewing our legal assistance strategy, which again we do periodically every 4 or 5 years. We will be looking at the programme for government and the key equality strategies that emanate from other bodies. I think, as the Chair maybe alluded to, one of the issues we have, although we've stayed with the Executive Office, a number of the equality strategies have moved into, primarily I think it's almost exclusively into communities. We will be still trying to change the legislation, and the main focus I think will be around age GFS. We will be doing some work in preparation for a formal review of the effectiveness of Section 75, and we hope to publish this year a report of investigation into the employment experiences of pregnant women. So it's quite a bit of work that the Commission basically has on an annual basis.
Great, Keith, thank you very much. I think that's a very useful overview. So within the average of 3.4% efficiencies, you were hit for 7,
Yes.
but it has not, in your view, impacted on your ability to deliver on your statutory duties.
Yes, that's the case. At the end of the day, there's ways and means basically of how to deliver the statutory duties. So it's not the case that we can't support legal cases.
And you heard what Mark Brown said about the difference between what ALBs were delivering and what was their statutory duty to deliver.
Yeah.
So do you stand accused of empire building and gold plating?
No, I think it's the way that we're actually doing our work. Certainly, if you take the things that we're having to roll back on are the day-to-day contact that we will have with the people who actually deliver equality on the ground. So part of the role that we see we have to do is to basically work with public authorities, work with service providers, work with employers, work with actually government departments, basically in terms of the helping them with the delivery of theirs. We're now more and more reaching a situation where that has to take longer. It has to be more hands-off, rather than actually having the one-to-one contact with people, which can be very beneficial in getting things done. It's done through the website. It's the information to complainants. We're trying to cut down as much as possible on the actual inquiry work that we do and to refer people onto the website to deliver it. So it's not that we can't deliver our statutory duties, but it does have an impact on the way we deliver it. Some of that I think you can describe as efficiencies, I think, and we will still continue to develop that. But some of it I think is just a different way of working that I think it impacts on the quality of the work we do, and certainly we will be doing these surveys basically hopefully at the end of this year, and we'll be in a position to actually assess what that impact is. Like this year we had a reduction in the number of cases we support. Normally it's about between 30 and 35%. This year it was 24% of the people who make applications for assistance. We've only supported a quarter of those, rather than about a third. Now, that figure does change from year to year, so we need to keep a close eye on that to see, is that just a temporary blip in terms of the cases, the quality of the cases that we had, or quality of the applications that we had come before us, or is this basically the first sign that basically are a sign that we're now basically having to roll back in some of the work that we're doing?
But the first half of your answer seemed to imply it wasn't that you were changing what you do, but you were changing how you do it to something less personal, more impersonal.
That's right.
Okay. Now that's interesting. You're saying you're not taking on so many cases, but surely it would be the quality of the case that would determine?
If I
Whether
can
you
give you
take
kind
it-
of some examples in respect of casework, we use in kind of round numbers, we say about 3,000 people contact us each year and say, I think I've been the victim of discrimination. And to the 3,000 people, and they generally contact us by telephone, and we really don't have the capacity these days to ask them to come in and talk to us face to face or to us to go and talk to them. But they all get advice on what they could potentially do. So it may well be, have you gone back to your employer? Have you asked for the reasons why you're treated this way? Have you done this? These are your rights if you wanted to lodge a case. So they all get that information. And of those 3,000 or so, about 300 come back and say, I have tried to sort it out myself. I think I would now like you to assist me. And we have a very clearly established policy about what we're interested in assisting cases. Some of those factors are actually set out in the legislation, and some of those are factors which we have developed additionally. So would this case raise awareness of the protections of the legislation, things like that. So we used to say that of those who came back to us, we tended to assist 1 in 3. In the past year, so that number has gone down, and we're intending now these more likely to assist 1 in 4, 1 in 5. We will need to review that to say, is it the case that the quality of cases coming in has now diminished a bit? And is that because, in fact, there's actually better employment practice and better service provision practice out there? Or is it, in fact, that we have felt constrained in some way to stay within our budget for legal services?
Right, so 3,000 people contact you, about 300 come
Back and ask for assistance?
Previously, you'd maybe help about 100 of them, but now
Yes.
it's going down maybe 75?
70, yeah, that kind of order.
Okay. And do you initiate? Do you go out and initiate cases?
No. No, we wait until individuals come forward to us.
You never go to an individual?
We
Or
do
to-
not go to an individual. What we do occasionally, for example, we may work with one of the voluntary sector organisations, for example, say in respect of migrant workers, to tell them about their rights, right? So that they know that they have the right not to be discriminated against. They know that they have the right not to be paid less than somebody, who's an Indigenous person. We might do that. We might go out to women's groups and talk to them about their experience when pregnant and returning from pregnancy. But we never go seeking cases from someone and saying, we want your case.
And out of your £5.75 million budget, how much of that is set aside for legal assistance?
Casework?
Yeah.
Casework is generally
Generally, in terms of the support that we provide, the programme cost is usually about between £250,000 and £300,000. But we do all our in-house, basically solicitor type work. So if you add in basically the staffing element of that there, we really spend just about £1.3 million is spent on supporting cases each year, if you include the salaries of the staff who are involved in that work.
And if you don't include the staff, you're down to 200,000-300,000?
yes,
Yeah, basically.
yeah.
Is that not quite a high percentage of your budget on your establishment?
In terms of staffing and the overall cost, it's roughly about a fifth of basically just more than that there of the work we do basically is in terms of legal support.
Do you know how that compares to the other ALBs under the Executive Office?
I don't think there's a comparable.
I don't think there is comparable in terms of taking cases to courts and tribunals.
No, casework,
Yeah.
as opposed to your establishment costs?
I don't think that any of the other ALBs take cases to courts and tribunals.
No, but they would have casework, they would have programme costs, that's what I'm talking about, as opposed to your establishment costs, your salaries, your overheads, your lighting.
So certainly there are strategic differences. If you look at someone like the Equality and Good Relations Commission, they would support actually a very small number of cases, but only basically cases so they would actually support cases that they would intervene in basically cases, and they tend to be a small number of cases at very high cost.
What I'm talking about is the difference between your establishment costs, running your ALB, and your programmes. You give legal assistance as a major programme.
Yeah.
The Victims Commission obviously do not do that sort of thing. But they would have programme costs. Research,
Yes.
for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you're still sponsored by the Executive Office, but as you say, a lot of the issues, gender, sexual orientation, disability, are now with communities. Have you figured out how that's going to work and how your relationships are going to hit a solid state?
Yeah, well, it is still very early days for that. Basically, one of it seems to be that certainly it is going to be difficult, basically, and certainly initially. Certainly, I think when we talk to the staff who are actually working those issues on the ground, basically there have been some transfers of staff into those as well. So some of the contacts that we've had through the Executive Office are moving actually with those areas into communities. It's part and parcel, I think, of what's going to be the new programme for government. It's going to be a new way of working. The way certainly we're looking at it is there's certainly going to be opportunities that if the executive are placing some of those areas in government departments where there's a great affinity to actually not simply write a strategy but get the work actually delivered on the ground, there are potential benefits we see from actually doing that. But certainly in terms of the process of the new programme for government, it means it's going to be very important that there is this idea of joined up working. So, we have always had good connections with other public bodies through the work we do with Section 75, through the work we do in various strategies and policy areas anyway. But it does mean there's going to be a bigger onus on us basically to make those connections and try and make sure that's all held together.
One of the big initiatives of the last programme for government was legislation which didn't come about with regard to goods, facilities and services and age discrimination. And of course, there was a complaint made by the Children's Commissioner about OFM breaching its own equality scheme, and that came to you. Can you update us on that?
That complaint is ongoing. We have asked at this stage for the office to provide us with a lot of their documentation in terms of how they considered and how they came to that decision that the legislation should be restricted to those who were 16 or more and not be provide rights to those under that age. And we have been recently advised by the officials that information has been pulled together, and I think is with ministers at present.
When did you make the request, out of interest?
When did I make the request? Can I come back to you on that? There's no point in me guessing.
Right, but it's obviously some time ago if you need to think about it.
It's a number of weeks ago. It's not a very long time ago, but I can come back to you with the accurate date.
Wait, when did you put the corporate plan into TEO?
The corporate plan was put into the department basically in April. So this year we had 11 new commissioners. This is probably the largest turnover we've had for some time. Normally we get the corporate plan to department by 31st of January. We agreed with them basically that given the new commissioners and to get some degree of input from new commissioners into that corporate plan, that we could delay basically putting that together to allow them to input to the plan and also allow for a proper consultation period.
When do you expect it to be signed off or returned?
Well, we're waiting on input from the department. Certainly, I think basically that everything went into PERDA, I think, with regard to the recent elections, so they're getting back to do that work now. And certainly, we met with the sponsor team earlier this week, and they basically should have basically, we would hope, their response to us, basically their formal response within the next week or so.
What about the proposal for an Equality and Good Relations Commission, which of course would have impacted on yourselves and the CRC? What's the latest?
Well, I think we don't describe it as cold. It's been put into cold storage. It's been put into warm storage. No one's actually come back to us and basically said that this isn't going to happen. But it doesn't appear that it's going to be happening in the near future. Certainly in terms of one of the areas that the department have identified for input into both our plan, I think the Community Relations Council's plans, is they would like us to take on board some of the things that they would wanted an Equality and Good Relations Commission to do. Only without having an Equality and Good Relations Commission, and we've said that yes, we are prepared to do that in principle, but it could only be to the extent that it was within the varies that we currently had, because we simply can't operate ultra varies. And we're basically also asked them how would that be resourced, and certainly we're waiting on a response from them about how if they would want to do this here, are they prepared to resource it as well?
Okay, thank you. Cathal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Obviously, stuff's new to me. Just obviously looking at your duties there, I mean, it's this argument now about equality versus good relations, and I believe it should be a bit of equality for all, you know what I mean? Not get into the terminology of that. The point I really want to ask you about is in light of the chair's question about cases, I want to ask about your more proactive work, and it may not be a role for you, but I'm thinking, for example, local authority, and you said about influence in policy. I think there's a good opportunity some of the powers would transfer down to local authority. How you would incorporate so all the things in terms of promoting equality of opportunity, good relations and all of that. And we'd like to respond on how you see that, or is there anything in relation to proactiveness?
Clearly, we work very frequently and well with local authorities, and you will understand that with the recent change in our district councils to a smaller number, we have got to know all of those district councils. One of the things that required was that each of those newer councils would draw up a new equality scheme, and we supported them through that. We provided them with advice, and I think of the 11 new councils, isn't that right? We have approved 8 of those equality schemes, and we're still working with 3 remaining. So our relationship is very good with councils.
I mean, I take it as 8 different equality schemes. No uniformity in any of that, no?
Oh yes, there is uniformity. We produce a model scheme, and clearly public authorities have found that has been helpful to them, but they have then tweaked that to reflect the circumstances, their own circumstances. So there clearly the legislation sets out things that must be in it. So the musts are always in. So actually they do look kind of quite alike. So as I say, we have 8 approved and 3 we're still working with.
Okay, well then and some people, I mean, we're now, obviously council is developing these community plans. In terms of your response to that, or are you partaking in any of that, or you engage with any of that? So, because I think there's good opportunities in relation to that. So I mean, just wondering, is there any proaction in relation to that? You're saying here, do conventions and different things. I'm just reading through this paper.
Certainly in terms of our advice to public authorities, some of the staff in Eileen's team would be meeting with them regularly in terms of how they mainstream equality through their community plans. In terms of my own team's work with regard to public policy, when we produce our recommendations for employment, education, housing, those are equally applicable to departments and to local councils to look to see what the areas of key inequalities are for us and how they can look through their areas to take account of that.
Okay. And that's through obviously publication, seminars and all of that. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Sure.
Thanks, Chair. You have said that one of your responsibilities is public authorities to meet their requirements of the equality law. Can you provide a list of the requests that has been made to yourselves for alleged breaches of equality? Public authorities.
Yeah, not today, but I think certainly we would have information on sort of the people who have got in touch with us about what are called paragraph 10 complaints and inquiries about schemes. Certainly we do hold that information, certainly.
Yeah, we have a list of that, and of course it is not always the case that if an individual comes forward and says, I believe that that authority has failed to comply. In fact, that is actually the finding after the investigation. Yeah. So sometimes there's findings of failure, sometimes there isn't.
Also the nature of the alleged breach.
Yes, it did.
Yes, yes.
And the action taken by yourselves. Yeah. You have all of that, and you can provide that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And Section 75, of course, came in with the Northern Ireland Act in 1998. And so those things became active from 1999 into 2000. There hasn't been a huge number of complaints. But yes, we do have a list of those complaints.
And in terms of successes, going back, do you follow the case right through? Do you take cases? Or do you just give advice?
In terms of an individual who's the victim of discrimination, as I say, in the first instance, we give advice. Individuals go away and try and sort it out themselves. Some individuals come back, and some of those we select to support. And when we support that, that includes legal advice to a court or tribunal, and we follow it right through to the end.
Yeah, I know people do come when anybody has got a constituency officers, and sometimes we signpost them to you, and you have been very helpful.
But we did a lot of work with basically MLA offices, basically I think about 2 years ago, where we tried to actually get out to the actual individual MLA offices and actually do some briefings basically in the constituency offices themselves.
Yeah, Chair, thanks.
Christopher?
Just on the point in terms of the final sentence there, in terms of selecting to support cases, how do you select to support a case? What's the process?
We have first of all, as I say, the statutes, the different statutes that we operate on have actually got some criteria within those statutes, so they're central to us. Above and beyond that, we then have identified what we call as a policy for the provision of advice and assistance to complainants. That's a policy which we review every couple of years. Public policy, it's clearly set down, things that we're interested in, things that we would do. We review it every couple of years, and in this current plan, which we've sent up to OFM, our corporate plan and our business plan, it says that we will review it again, and we usually do that in a very public way.
So is there a set criteria in terms of, a case or complaint must meet the following points?
Can I read some of them out to you, Chris, because it's flicking through there. So again, I can certainly provide you with this document, which is the current policy, but it's things like the extent to which the case meets the overall strategic objectives of the Commission and falls into one or more of the following areas of interest. And we actually do then identify quite a wide range of possible areas that would fall within that. The extent to which the matter may raise an issue of legal uncertainty, the extent to which the case is likely to raise public awareness regarding individual complaints and about the protection provided by law.
If you're likely to get an increased public awareness about an individual complaint, that makes it more likely that you would take action.
Well, basically, it's this common phrase that's used called ripple effect.
Yes.
That at the end of the day, certainly, if there are cases that we feel would highlight basically an inadequacy in the law or would likely to raise an issue of public profile, basically. And it's a scoring system that we use. The process is that case comes in, we deal with you as an individual, we collect your information. That case then has to go to what's called a legal funding committee, and they take the decision, which are a group of commissioners who take the decision about which they will have from one of our senior legal officers basically a document, basically a pro forma, which basically goes through this here, scores it and explains it. And on balance, we also have a phrase which is called cost commensurate. They've got to take a decision of whether the costs of actually running this case are commensurate with what describes as the possible benefits to be gained.
Yes.
And it's really, I appreciate that there's a qualitative aspect to that there, but there are certain criteria that we have set down on paper which we're accountable for, particularly for cases where an individual basically says, why wasn't my case supported?
Could we have sight? Sorry, Christopher. Could we have sight of that?
Oh yes, it's on our website.
It's on our website.
Yes,
certainly,
and as I say, we're likely to review it this year.
Yeah, it's called the Policy Provision of Legal Advice and Assistance.
And I think the other thing I'd like to say is we provide assistance on a staged basis. So we say to an individual, we are going to assist your case, and in the first instance, we will assist that to further investigation and potentially legal opinion, and then we reconsider again. So that we don't kind of make a commitment very early on that we're in that case forever. It's a staged assistance.
Yes, and in terms of, so I would agree with the Chair, I would like to see the criteria. In terms of cost commensurate, just for information, how much did the case against Ashers cost?
The case that went to the county court, it was an unusual case because not many cases go to county court, but goods and services cases go to county court, and I think we paid £44,000 in that case.
£44,000
yes.
Taxpayers' money? Of
taxpayers' money, and that case and the assistance to that I think was reviewed some 6 or 7 times throughout the journey of the case.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think.
Right,
Oh yes. Okay, Stuart.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee, and thank you for the information which you provided to us. May I ask you to what extent you have assessed the failure of the Executive Office to bring forward a single equality bill for Northern Ireland, and what impact that has on your organisation having to deal with currently disparate pieces of legislation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Commission continues to call for a single equality bill. We think it would be not only beneficial for ourselves in terms of the legislation, but simply in terms of simplifying and harmonising for all, be it the individuals, be it employers, be it service providers. we haven't done a formal assessment of the cost of the failure beyond that, but we do, as part of our law reform recommendations, of which there are many, our first is always to call for single equality.
Perhaps in the back of that, Chair, then we should ask the Executive Office what plans they have to bring forward a single.
It might be the Department of the Communities.
It is. I think it is, yeah.
Well, that again, sorry, Chair, just to intervene then, highlights the issue that's been raised here today in terms of the transfer of functions and where those functions now lie between Executive Office, between Department of Communities and a whole raft of quality legislation.
It's still out with our brief if it's in communities.
That's fine.
Okay, Eileen, Garen and Keith, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, actually we have a little bit of a legislation before we finish, members, but just on the question of how these ALBs spend their money. In my experience, each one calculates differently between the establishment costs, i.e. the cost of running the organisation, and the amount of money they spend on programmes, whether it's providing legal advice, research, whatever. Particularly whether they include the staff costs or not, because if you do, then the percentage of money you spend on programmes clearly looks better because it's higher. Could I suggest we ask research to take a look at the ALBs that fall within the Executive Office and do some research into the split of the budget between establishment costs and money that's actually spent helping people?
Great.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, legislation. Not that exciting. But page 125 of your pack, there's a proposal from the Executive Office to make a statutory rule, and this will amend the list of public bodies who will be treated as public authorities for the purposes of Part 7 of the Fair Employment and Treatment Northern Ireland Order 1998, which is FETO, duties of employers in respect of their workforces. Now, these amending orders are normally made on an annual basis, and they take account of new bodies being established, bodies being wound up, or bodies whose titles have changed. So the clerk has given us a brief, which is at page 122. Some background information on subordinate legislation is provided at page 134. And it's the responsibility of ourselves to scrutinise the policy proposal behind a statutory rule. We've already agreed on the 1st of June to delegate responsibility for technical scrutiny to the examiner of statutory rules, and the examiner will report in due course after the rule has been laid. So, any questions or comments on the process for subordinate legislation, members? No? Okay. So paragraph 10 of the clerk's brief outlines the bodies which have been added to the list, the bodies being removed, and the reason why. So it's proposed the rule will come into operation on the 1st of August of this year and subject to negative resolution. That means, should it wish, the committee will have an opportunity to pray against the regulations at the beginning of the next session. Members, any comments? No? Are we content with this
Agreed.
earth-shattering rule change?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so once again, it goes to the Business Office and it will be reported upon by the examiner of statutory rules. And there's our first bit of legislation. Correspondence, members, there's a summary sheet at page 138 of the meeting pack. I'll ask the clerk to highlight anything that she thinks needs to be brought to her attention particularly.
Thanks, Chair. There's just a couple of things. The first one is at page 139. The Commissioner for Older People sent letters to the Deputy Chairperson and the Chairperson requesting suggesting that they may wish to meet on areas of interest, but a similar letter I think was sent to all statutory committees, so it's just to check if members are happy to write back to say that the committee may engage at a later date whenever the proposed legislation on HGFS comes forward.
Great.
And then there's a DSC stakeholder update at page 144, and it gives dates for forthcoming draft PFG framework consultation events. is to check if members are content to forward that to other statutory committees for information. And just finally, members, just there is in table papers, there's a copy of the press release regarding the Commission on Flags, Identity, Culture and Tradition. That's just for your information, just to draw to your attention that it's there.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Draft forward work programme. We are talking about our strategic planning meeting being on Wednesday, the 7th of September. Members, now, if you look at page 148 of your pack, you'll see the committee staff have come up with a number of options for potential venues. A couple of things I would add, as discussed, I think Philip has a morning meeting up for another strategic planning day, so I think going too far from Belfast would be disadvantageous to him. I'm happy that we do stray over the course of the mandate, far and wide. The other thing is, with regard to the budget process, it may be that we actually need to have a formal meeting on the 7th of September, as well as a less formal strategic planning day, in which case we need to be mindful that the venue can record and do what we do in this room. So it might even be a case of saying the best thing to do is to come back to Stormont, an away day at home, as it were. But I'm happy to look at suggestions and hear your comments. And on that basis, again, I think I would like us to go to the North South Ministerial Council offices, but I don't think this is the time to do it. But I'm happy to say over the course of the next 12 months, Captain.
And away day at home. Sure, away day at home is away day for us every day coming in.
Well, day at home.
No, that's grand. That sounds, I mean, because in case we need the element.
Well, there is an advantage in getting out of the building. I mean, is there anywhere in the kind of greater Belfast area that appeals?
Stranmillis College.
Yeah. That's not far away.
It's not far away.
Yeah, it's the afternoon, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, Chair, to be fair to them, sorry.
I will let this young man go to his morning meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, it's grand.
Shall we say Stranmillis, but we'll come back in if we have to?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking about 1 o'clock for a sandwich lunch, 2 o'clock for a meeting, wrapped up by about 4.
No problem.
Okay, and we'll just keep a weather eye on finance. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any other comments on the draft work programme? If not, we consider that agreed and move to any other business. If not, our final meeting of the session is Wednesday the 29th, 2 p.m. here in room 30, and until then, we are adjourned.
Jerry, you'll join with me in wishing the Irish team.
I would wish Martin O'Neill and the team every success and hope to see them in the last 16. And congratulate Northern Ireland and the goalkeeper and above all the fans.
Yeah.